The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what lay beyond. They built rockets. They reached their moon. They touched Mars. And then, 300 years ago, they built their first colony ship. The ship was called the Dawn of Hope. It carried 40,000 souls, families, children, scientists, farmers, teachers. They were the best of humanity. They were brave enough to leave everything behind and travel to a new world. They wanted to start a new life among the stars. Admiral Una was only a child when her grandmother told her the story. Her grandmother's eyes would fill with tears every time she spoke of it. Her grandmother's mother had been on that ship. She never came back. The Dawn of Hope traveled for 2 years through the darkness of space. The passengers slept in cold chambers, dreaming of green fields and blue skies on a distant world. They did not know that something was watching them. The Valari Empire controlled 100 star systems. They had ruled for 10,000 years. They saw themselves as the masters of the galaxy. Other species were tools to be used, resources to be taken. The Valari were tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were black as the void between stars. They felt no pity. They knew no mercy. When their patrol ships found the Dawn of Hope, they did not see brave pioneers. They saw cargo. They saw slaves. The Valari disabled the human ship with a single shot. They boarded it without warning. The humans woke from their cold sleep to find monsters standing over them. Families were torn apart. Children were ripped from their mothers' arms. The screaming lasted for hours. 40,000 humans were taken to the Valari homeworld. They were put to work in mines and factories. They were treated worse than animals. Many died in the first year. Many more died in the years that followed. The Valari worked them until their bodies broke, and then they threw them away like garbage. Earth received one message from the Dawn of Hope before it went silent. Just one. A single voice, filled with terror. They're taking us. Remember us. And humanity remembered. 300 years later, Admiral Una stood in the war room of Earth's Global Defense Council. She was 52 years old, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her uniform was black, decorated with the silver stars of her rank. She had served humanity for 30 years. She had waited her whole life for this day. Around her sat the 12 members of the council. They represented every nation on Earth. They had put aside their differences long ago, united by a common purpose. The memory of the Dawn of Hope had changed humanity forever. The Valari believe we are weak, Una said. Her voice was calm and cold. They believe we are still a small species, struggling on our homeworld. They believe we forgot what they did to us. She pressed a button and a holographic map appeared above the table. It showed the Valari Empire in red. 112 star systems. Thousands of planets. Billions of soldiers. It was the largest empire in the known galaxy. We have not forgotten, Una continued. We have been preparing. Councilman Minho leaned forward. He was the oldest member of the council, 90 years old, but still sharp. His grandfather had been born in the camps on the Valari homeworld. His grandfather had escaped as a young man, one of the few who ever did. He brought back stories that still gave Minho nightmares. How many ships? Minho asked. 10,000 warships, Una answered. The largest fleet in human history. We have been building them in secret for 50 years. Hidden in asteroid fields. Disguised as mining operations. The Valari never suspected. Councilwoman Jisoo stood up. She was young, only 35, but she had earned her place on the council. She was the head of Earth's intelligence service. Her agents had spent decades studying the Valari, learning their weaknesses. The Valari are powerful, Jisoo said, but they are also arrogant. They have not fought a real war in 2,000 years. They use slave soldiers from conquered species. Those soldiers hate their masters. When we attack, many will refuse to fight. Some may even turn against the Volari. Yuna nodded. We have been in contact with resistance movements across the Empire. When our fleet arrives, they will rise up. The Volari will face enemies on all sides. The council members looked at each other. They had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. Their parents had prepared. Their grandparents had prepared. 7 generations of humanity had worked in secret, building, planning, waiting. What about the cost? Asked Councilman Dohan. He was a quiet man, a mathematician who calculated risks. Even if we win, how many will we lose? Yuna looked at him without emotion. Many, perhaps millions. War always has a cost. But the Volari took 40,000 of our people. They tortured them. They worked them to death. They erased them from history. If we do nothing, they will do it again. They will find another colony ship. They will take more of our children. She paused and looked around the room. My grandmother's mother died in the Volari mines. She was 19 years old. She had a name. She had dreams. She wanted to be a teacher. The Volari gave her a number and worked her until she collapsed. Her body was thrown into a furnace with thousands of others. The room was silent. Every person there had a similar story. Every family on Earth had been touched by the tragedy of the dawn of hope. We do not fight for revenge, Yuna said softly. We fight so that no human will ever suffer that fate again. We fight so that the galaxy will know. Humanity protects its own. Councilwoman Sujin, the youngest member at 32, spoke up. The other species in the galaxy. What will they think? Will they see us as liberators or conquerors? They will see us as a warning, Yuna answered. The Volari have oppressed dozens of species. They have taken slaves from every corner of the galaxy. When those species see us defeat the Volari, they will understand something important. The strong are not always right, and the weak do not stay weak forever. Minho stood up slowly, his old bones aching. He walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Billions of humans lived on Earth now. Billions more lived on colony worlds throughout human space. They had grown strong in the shadows, hidden from the galaxy. I have waited my whole life for this, Minho said quietly. My grandfather told me stories of the camps. He told me about the children who were separated from their parents. He told me about the workers who were beaten for being too slow. He told me about the mass graves. He turned to face the council. Tears ran down his wrinkled cheeks. He also told me something else. He told me that one day, humanity would return. He told me that we would make the Volari answer for what they did. He made me promise to live long enough to see it. Minho looked at Yuna. I am 90 years old. I may not survive to see the end of this war. I may not survive to see the end of this war. But I will die knowing that we finally kept our promise. The council voted. It was unanimous. The war would begin. Yuna spent the next several hours in her office, reviewing battle plans. Commander Tay, her second in command, brought her reports from the fleet. Everything was ready. 10,000 ships waited in the darkness of space, their crews eager for battle. The pilots are nervous, Tay said. He was a tall man with a calm voice. He had served under Yuna for 20 years. Not afraid, just nervous. They want to make their ancestors proud. They will, Yuna said. Tell them that every generation has carried this burden. Now it is our turn. We will not fail. Tay saluted and left. Yuna sat alone in the darkness, looking at the stars through her window. Somewhere out there, the Volari were sleeping peacefully. They had no idea what was coming. Yuna thought about her grandmother, who had died 5 years ago. She thought about her grandmother's mother, the young woman who had dreamed of being a teacher. She thought about 40,000 souls who had been stolen from the stars. "We're coming," she whispered to the darkness. "We remember. We have always remembered." She closed her eyes and made a silent promise to the dead. Their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Their suffering would not be in vain. Humanity would settle its debt, and the galaxy would tremble. The next morning, Una addressed the fleet. Her face appeared on screens across 10,000 ships. Millions of soldiers watched and listened. 300 years ago, she began, our ancestors reached for the stars. They were met with cruelty beyond imagination. They were taken. They were enslaved. They were murdered. The Valari believed they had broken us. They believed we would cower on our homeworld forever, too afraid to challenge them. Her voice grew stronger. They were wrong. We did not break. We grew stronger. We built ships. We trained warriors. We waited. And now, the time for waiting is over. She raised her fist. We carry the names of the dead in our hearts. We carry their dreams in our souls. Today, we honor them. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you harm humanity's children. Today, we settle our debt. Across the fleet, millions of voices roared in response. The ships powered up their engines. The weapons systems came online. The largest military force in human history prepared to move. Una watched the stars one last time. Then she gave the order. Begin the operation. May our ancestors guide us. The fleet moved into the darkness, silent and deadly. The Valari Empire had no idea that its end had begun. 300 years of pain and preparation had led to this moment. Humanity was coming to collect what it was owed, and they would not be gentle. Commander Tay stood on the bridge of the flagship, the Eternal Memory. It was the largest ship humanity had ever built. 2 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could crack a planet in half. Around it, 10,000 warships moved through the darkness of space like ghosts. They traveled in complete silence. No radio signals. No communications between ships. Every captain knew the plan by heart. They had trained for this moment for years. They did not need to speak. Tay watched the stars pass by on the main screen. He was 45 years old, born on a colony world called New Sol. His great-great-grandmother had been one of the survivors from the Valari camps. She had escaped when she was just 16 years old, smuggled off the planet by resistance fighters. She had lived to be 103, long enough to hold baby Tay in her arms. Never forget, she had told him on her deathbed. Never forgive. And when the time comes, show them no mercy. Tay had carried those words his whole life. Now he was about to fulfill her wish. Lieutenant Hannah approached him with a datapad. She was young, only 28, but she was one of the best tactical officers in the fleet. Her mind worked like a computer, calculating angles and trajectories faster than any machine. "Sir, we are entering dark space," she reported. "No Valari patrols detected. Our stealth systems are working perfectly." Tay nodded. "How long until we reach the first target?" 17 days at current speed. The outer colony of Velaris Prime. Tay looked at the star map on the screen. The Valari Empire spread across 100 star systems, but it was not as strong as it looked. The Empire had been built on slave labor and fear. The Valari themselves were few in number, perhaps only 1 billion across all their worlds. They controlled their empire with technology and cruelty, but they had grown lazy over the centuries. They had not fought a real war in 2,000 years. They had forgotten what war truly meant. Humanity had not forgotten. In the darkness of space, away from the main fleet, Captain Sujin led a special squadron of 50 ships. They were smaller than the warships, built for speed and stealth. Their mission was different from the main fleet. They were going ahead to prepare the way. Sujin was 34 years old, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She had volunteered for this mission because she wanted to be the first to strike. Her family had a special connection to the Dawn of Hope. Her ancestor had been the captain of that doomed ship. "Captain, we're approaching the communication relay." Her navigator, a young man named Junho, reported. "No enemy ships in range." Sujin studied the relay on her screen. It was a massive structure floating in space, larger than a small moon. The Valari used it to send messages across their empire at faster than light speeds. Without it, the outer colonies would be cut off from the core worlds. "Prepare the charges," Sujin ordered. "We plant them, we leave." No traces. Her crew worked quickly and quietly. They had practiced this operation hundreds of times. Small ships detached from the squadron and flew toward the relay. They moved like shadows, invisible to Valari sensors. The charges were special weapons, designed by human scientists over 50 years. They would not explode immediately. They would wait, hidden inside the relay structure, until the main attack began. Then they would activate, and the Valari communication network would go dark. It was just one of many operations happening across the Empire. Other squadrons were planting charges on defense stations, power plants, and military bases. When the war began, the Valari would find themselves blind and deaf, unable to coordinate their forces. Sujin watched her crew work with pride. These were the children and grandchildren of survivors. They had grown up hearing stories of Valari cruelty. They did not need motivation. They needed only the chance to fight back. "Charges planted," Junho reported. "No detection. We're clear to withdraw." Sujin allowed herself a small smile. "Good work. Move to the next target." Her squadron disappeared into the darkness, leaving no trace of their visit. The Valari relay continued to function normally, unaware of the death that slept inside it. Back on the eternal memory, Tay received reports from squadrons across the Empire. Everything was going according to plan. The Valari had no idea that death was creeping toward them from every direction. He walked through the ship, visiting different sections. In the training halls, soldiers practiced combat techniques. In the medical bays, doctors prepared for the wounded that would surely come. In the engine rooms, technicians monitored the massive power cores that drove the ship through space. Everyone he met had the same look in their eyes. Determination, purpose. They were not fighting for glory or wealth. They were fighting for their ancestors. They were fighting for justice. Tay stopped at a small memorial in the center of the ship. It was a wall covered with names. 40,000 names, one for each person taken on the Dawn of Hope. Some names were complete. Some were only first names. Some were just descriptions. Unknown child, age 5 inches, or unnamed infant. The Valari had not bothered to record the names of their slaves. Humanity had spent 300 years trying to recover those names. Survivors told their stories. Records were searched. Genetic databases were analyzed. Slowly, painfully, the names were restored. Tay found his ancestor's name near the bottom. Park Yoonji, age 16. A small picture was attached to the entry, recovered from old databases. She had been beautiful, with long dark hair and bright eyes. She had dreamed of being a doctor. "We're almost there, grandmother," Tay whispered. "Almost there." He touched the name gently, then continued his walk through the ship. In another part of the fleet, a young pilot named Minjun sat in his fighter, running through pre-flight checks. He was only 23, one of the youngest pilots in the fleet. He had grown up on Earth, in a small town near the sea. His mother had been a teacher. His father had been a fisherman, but both of them had also been soldiers. Every adult on Earth trained for combat. It was not required by law. It was simply understood. When the time came, everyone would fight. Minjun had shown talent for flying at a young age. By 15, he could handle any aircraft on Earth. By 18, he was accepted into the space fighter program. By 21, he was one of the best pilots humanity had ever produced. His fighter was called the Hornet. It was small and fast, designed for close combat. Its weapons could punch through Valari shields in seconds. Minjun had trained in simulators for years, fighting virtual battles against Valari ships. He had won every single time, but this would be different. This would be real. Real enemies. Real death. He was not afraid. He was ready. "Hey, rookie," a voice called from behind him. It was Lieutenant Era, his squadron leader. She was 32, a veteran of several border skirmishes with pirates and raiders. "How are you feeling?" "Ready, sir," Minjun answered. "I've been ready my whole life." Era smiled. "That's what I like to hear. Just remember your training. Stay calm, trust your wingmates, and don't be a hero." "Don't be a hero?" "Heroes die young. We need you alive. Win the battle. Stay alive. Repeat. That's how we win this war." Minjun nodded. "Understood, sir." Era patted his shoulder and moved on to check the other pilots. Minjun returned to his checks, his hands steady on the controls. Somewhere out there, the Valari were living their lives, unaware of the storm coming their way. On the flagship, Admiral Yuna received daily reports from across the fleet. The operation was proceeding perfectly. No detection. No accidents. The Valari remained ignorant that she spent most of her time studying enemy intelligence. Jisu's agents had gathered enormous amounts of information over the decades. They knew the location of every Valari ship. They knew the schedules of every patrol. They knew the weaknesses of every defense system. But there was one thing they did not know: how the Valari would react. When they finally realized what was happening, the Valari had not faced a serious threat in millennia. They might panic. They might surrender. Or they might fight with desperate fury, willing to destroy everything rather than lose. Yuna prepared for all possibilities. "Admiral," her aide reported, "we've received confirmation from the resistance networks. They're ready to move when we give the signal." Yuna nodded. Across the Empire, millions of enslaved beings waited for their moment of freedom. They had hidden weapons. They had planned escape routes. They knew which Valari officers to target first. When the human fleet attacked from outside, the slaves would rise up from within. The Valari would face enemies everywhere. Their empire would collapse like a house built on sand. "Send acknowledgement," Yuna ordered. "Tell them to hold position until they hear the signal. No early movements. We strike together or not at all." The aide hurried away to send the message. Yuna turned back to the star map. 14 days until they reached the first target. 14 days until 3 centuries of waiting finally ended. She thought about what would come after the war. If they won, humanity would be one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Other civilizations would look at them with fear and respect. The days of being a small, weak species would be over forever. The power was dangerous. History had shown that again and again. Species that gained too much power often became the very monsters they had fought against. Yuna swore to herself that this would not happen to humanity. They would defeat the Valari. They would free the slaves. And then they would build something better. A galaxy where no species lived in fear. A galaxy where the strong protected the weak. In Captain Hana's squadron emerged from darkness like ghosts. 50 small ships, painted black as space itself, moving without sound or signal. Their target was the Valari defense grid that protected the outer colony of Corinth. If they could disable it, The main fleet could attack without resistance. Hana was 31 years old, with steady hands and a mind that never stopped calculating. She had graduated first in her class at the military academy. She had broken every record in stealth operations. Now she was about to break something else: the Valari sense of safety. "All ships, maintain formation," she whispered into her communicator. They were using tight beam transmissions that could not be detected from more than a few kilometers away. "Target the power nodes." We hit them all at once. The defense grid was massive, a network of weapons platforms and shield generators that surrounded the entire planet. It had been built 500 years ago, when the Valari still feared attacks from rival powers. Since then, it had never been tested in real combat. That was about to change. Hana watched the countdown on her screen. 17 minutes. That was how long they had until the main fleet arrived. If the grid was still active when Admiral Yuna's warships appeared, thousands of human soldiers would die in the first minutes of battle. "Approaching Power Node 7, her pilot reported. His name was Dongwook, a quiet man who spoke only when necessary. He was the best pilot Hana had ever worked with. "Hold at 100 meters. Prepare the charges." The ship slowed to a crawl. Outside, the power node glowed with energy, feeding the defensive weapons around it. It was unguarded. The Valari had never imagined anyone would dare to come this close. Their arrogance would be their downfall. "Charges ready," Dongwook said. "Launch." A small pod shot from their ship and attached itself to the power node. It made no sound. It gave off no signal. It simply waited, counting down the seconds. Across the defense grid, 49 other ships did the same thing. They moved like shadows, planting their charges and withdrawing before anyone could notice. The Valari patrol ships continued their lazy routes, seeing nothing wrong. 14 minutes passed. Hana's squadron regrouped at a safe distance, hidden behind a small moon. She checked the status of every ship. All charges planted. No detection. Perfect. 3 minutes to activation, she announced. "When the charges blow, the grid will have a gap in Sector 7. The main fleet will enter through that gap." Her crew waited in tense silence. They had trained for this moment for years, but training was different from reality. In training, no one really died. Today, death was very real. 2 minutes. Hana thought about her family back on Earth. Her mother, who had cried when she left for the military. Her younger brother, who had looked at her with such pride. She had promised them she would come back safely. She intended to keep that promise. 1 minute. The Valari patrol ships continued their routes. The defense grid hummed with power. The planet below turned slowly, its inhabitants going about their daily lives, unaware of what was coming. 0. The charges exploded simultaneously. 40 power nodes died in an instant, their energy cascading outward in brilliant flashes of light. The defense grid, which had protected Corinth for 5 centuries, suddenly had a massive hole in it. Alarms screamed across the planet. Valari commanders shouted orders in confusion. They had no idea what had happened. An accident? A malfunction? They never considered the possibility of attack. They never considered humans. 17 minutes after, Hana's squadron began their mission. Admiral Yuna's fleet arrived. 2,000 warships poured through the gap in the defense grid like water through a broken dam. They emerged into Corinth space and immediately began their attack. The Valari defense ships scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. Human weapons tore through their shields. Human fighters swarmed around them like angry wasps. In the first 10 minutes of battle, half of Corinth's defense fleet was destroyed. On the surface, the Valari population watched in horror as fires bloomed across the sky. Some ran for shelters. Others simply stood and stared, unable to believe what they were seeing. The humans had come. After 300 years of silence, the humans had come. Admiral Yuna watched the battle from the bridge of the eternal memory. Everything was going according to plan, but she took no joy in it. War was not something to celebrate. It was something to survive. Resistance is collapsing, Commander Tay reported. Their command structure is in chaos. They can't coordinate their defenses. Send a message to all ships, Yuna ordered. Minimize civilian casualties. We are here for the military, not the people. Some might have questioned that order. The Valari had shown no mercy to human civilians 300 years ago. Why should humans show mercy now? But Yuna understood something that the Valari did not. True strength was not about destruction. It was about control. Anyone could burn a city. It took real power to conquer one without destroying it. Besides, the civilians on Corinth were not all Valari. Most of them were slaves from a dozen different species, forced to work in mines and factories. They were victims, not enemies. The battle for Corinth lasted 6 hours. By the end, every Valari military installation on the planet had been destroyed. The surviving Valari soldiers had surrendered or fled. Human forces controlled the skies, but this was just the beginning. While the battle for Corinth raged, Captain Sujin's special squadron activated their hidden charges across the Empire. Communication relays went dark. Power stations exploded. Defense satellites suddenly stopped working. The Valari Empire's network, which had taken thousands of years to build, began to fall apart in hours. On the Valari homeworld, Emperor Vorn received the news with disbelief. He was ancient, over 300 years old by human counting. He had ruled the Empire for most of that time. He had never faced a real crisis. "What do you mean, humans?" he demanded. His forearms trembled with rage. "Humans are primitives. They don't have this kind of technology." "The reports are confirmed, Your Majesty," his advisor said, bowing low. "Human warships have attacked Corinth. Our outer defense network has been compromised. We've lost contact with 30 systems." 30 systems? In how many hours? "Approximately 12, Your Majesty." Vorn stared at his advisor. This was impossible. The Valari were the masters of the galaxy. They had conquered 100 worlds. They had enslaved dozens of species. They could not be challenged by primitive apes from a backwater planet. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. Human ships filled the skies of his empire. Human weapons destroyed his fleets. Human soldiers freed his slaves. The slaves. Vorn suddenly understood the true danger. The Valari Empire was built on slave labor. Billions of beings from conquered species worked in mines and factories, kept in line by fear and violence. If those slaves learned that the Valari could be defeated, lock down all slave facilities, he ordered. Execute any who show signs of rebellion, and send a home fleet to Corinth. I want every human ship destroyed. But it was already too late. Across the Empire, the message spread like fire. The humans were attacking. The humans were winning. The unbeatable Valari were being beaten down in the mines of Torith. Workers whispered to each other in the darkness. In the factories of Corinth, overseers suddenly found themselves surrounded by hostile faces. In the labor camps of a dozen worlds, people who had been broken by decades of cruelty suddenly remembered what hope felt like. The resistance movements activated their plans. Weapons that had been hidden for years appeared in the hands of former slaves. Guards who had tortured and killed were themselves killed. Prison doors opened. Ships were stolen. Lieutenant Minjun flew through the chaos of battle, his hornet dancing between enemy fire. He had already destroyed 3 Valari fighters. His squadron had lost 2 pilots. The numbers were in their favor, but every death hurt. "Hornet 7, on your left," he shouted into his radio. His wingmate banked hard. barely avoiding a blast that would have torn her ship apart. She returned fire, destroying the enemy vessel in a brilliant explosion. "Thanks, rookie," she said. "I owe you one." They were not supposed to use that word in battle, rookie, but somehow it made things feel normal. Like they were back in training, instead of fighting for their lives. The Valari pilots were not bad, but they were not good either. They had spent too many years fighting weak enemies. They had forgotten how to face a real challenge. The human pilots, trained against the best simulations humanity could create, outflew them at every turn. By the end of the day, Corinth's skies belonged to humanity. Captain Hannah landed her ship on the planet's surface, in a clearing that had once been a Valari military base. Smoke rose from destroyed buildings. Prisoners wandered in confusion, blinking at the sky they had not seen in years. She stepped out of her ship and looked around. This was what victory looked like. Not glory, not celebration, but destruction and confusion and the long work of rebuilding. A group of former slaves approached her. They were thin and scarred, their bodies marked by years of abuse. They looked at her with something she did not expect: gratitude. "Are you human?" one of them asked. His voice was rough from disuse. "Yes," Hannah said. "You came. After all this time. You really dead." General Wu stood before the broadcast equipment, his face calm and hard. He was 63 years old, a soldier who had served humanity his entire life. Now he was about to deliver a message that would echo across the galaxy. Behind him, the Valari homeworld burned. The human fleet had arrived 3 weeks after the first attack on Corinth. They had fought through 70 star systems, destroying every military force the Valari sent against them. The slave uprisings had spread like wildfire, consuming the empire from within. Now, finally, the fleet orbited the heart of Valari power. "Begin transmission," Wu ordered. The technician activated the equipment. The message would be broadcast on every frequency, reaching every ship and station and planet in known space. Friend and enemy alike would hear it. Wu stared into the camera with eyes that held no mercy. "This is General Wu of the Human Defense Force, speaking to the Valari Empire and to all who watch. 300 years ago, you took 40,000 of our people, innocent families, sleeping children, dreamers who wanted nothing but to explore the stars." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You worked them to death in your mines. You beat them in your factories. You threw their bodies into furnaces like garbage. You thought we would forget. You thought we would never come." His voice grew colder. "You were wrong. We remember every name. We remember every face. We have carried their memory for 3 centuries, and now we have come to collect what is owed." On the Valari homeworld, Emperor Vorn watched the broadcast with terror in his ancient eyes. His palace shook from distant explosions. His advisors had fled. His guards had surrendered or died. "You took 40,000 of ours," Wu continued. "We will take everything of yours. Your empire, your power, your pride. All of it ends today. This is not war. This is reckoning." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in stunned silence. Admiral Yuna observed the burning planet from her ship. The Valari military had been destroyed. Their fleet was scattered wreckage floating in orbit. Their ground forces had been overwhelmed by combined human and rebel attacks, but she did not feel triumph. She felt tired. War was exhausting, even when you were winning. "Admiral, we've captured the Emperor," Commander Tay reported. "He was trying to escape through a hidden tunnel. Our ground forces intercepted him. Bring him to me." 20 minutes later, Emperor Vorn stood before her on the bridge of the eternal memory. He looked small and pathetic, a creature who had once commanded billions, now reduced to a prisoner in chains. "So this is the great Emperor," Yuna said quietly. the ruler of 100 worlds, the master of millions of slaves. Vorn tried to maintain his dignity. His forearms trembled, but his voice was steady. You have won, human. What do you want? Tribute? Territory? Name your price and leave us in peace. Yuna studied him for a long moment. This creature, this thing, had inherited an empire built on suffering. He had continued the traditions of his ancestors, keeping slaves and crushing any who opposed him. He had never questioned whether it was wrong. He had never even thought about it. You ask what we want, she said finally. Let me tell you a story. My grandmother's mother was on the dawn of hope. She was 19 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. Do you know what happened to her? Vorn said nothing. She was taken to your mines. She was given a number instead of a name. She was forced to work until her body broke. She died at 23, 4 years after your people took her. Her body was burned with thousands of others. Yuna stepped closer to the Emperor. She had a daughter before she died. A little girl who watched her mother work herself to death. That girl eventually escaped. She made it back to Earth. She had a daughter of her own, and that daughter had me. Her voice was cold as space itself. You ask what we want. We want justice. We want our people back. But since you cannot give us that, we will take everything else. Vorn's composure finally broke. You can't do this. The galaxy will not allow it. Other powers are watching and learning, Yuna interrupted. They are learning that cruelty has a cost. They are learning that the strong can fall. They are learning that humanity does not forget. She turned away from him. Take him to the holding cells. He will face trial for crimes against sentient beings. The guards dragged the former emperor away. He screamed and pleaded, but no one listened. He had never listened to the screams of his slaves. Now no one would listen to his dog. The liberation of the Valari homeworld took 3 days. Human soldiers and rebel fighters moved through cities and labor camps, freeing prisoners and accepting surrenders. The Valari population, suddenly robbed of their power, hid in their homes and prayed for mercy. Captain Hana led a unit through the capital city. The streets were filled with smoke and rubble, but here and there she saw signs of life returning. Former slaves helping each other. Families reuniting. Children seeing the sky for the first time. One building stood out from the others, the Imperial Archive. It was where the Valari kept their records, including records of the slaves they had taken over thousands of years. Secure this building, Hana ordered her troops. No one enters or leaves until our historians arrive. Inside, she found row after row of data storage devices. The history of Valari cruelty, recorded in cold, precise detail. Names of slaves. Dates of purchase. Work assignments. Death records. She found the records from 300 years ago. The dawn of hope. The Valari had not named their slaves, but they had counted them. 42,117 beings taken from a human colony ship, assigned to various labor camps across the empire. Current status: terminated. Every single one. Hana stared at the records until her eyes burned. She had known this, of course. Everyone knew that no one from the dawn of hope had survived for long. But seeing it written down so coldly, so casually, made it real in a way that stories never could. Captain? One of her soldiers asked. Are you all right? No, she said softly. I'm not all right. But I will be. We all will be. She ordered the records preserved. Historians would study them for years, piecing together the full story of what had happened. Names would be recovered. Families would finally know the fate of their ancestors. The dead would be remembered. It was the least they could do. In space above the planet, Lieutenant Minjun floated in his cockpit, looking down at the world he had helped conquer. It looked peaceful from up here, a blue and green marble against the black of space. Hard to believe so much suffering had happened on its surface. Hornet leader to all units. Lieutenant Era's voice crackled over the radio. Stand down. The battle is over. Minjun let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. It was over. They had done it. But as he looked at the planet below, he did not feel joy. He felt tired. He felt sad. He felt something he had not expected. Pity. The Valari people were not monsters. Not really. They were just ordinary beings who had been taught that cruelty was normal. They had grown up in a system that treated other species as property. Most of them had never questioned it because they had never been encouraged to question it. Now their world had fallen. Their empire was gone. Their entire way of life had been destroyed in a matter of weeks. Many of them would spend the rest of their lives trying to understand what had happened. Minjun wondered what humanity would do with this victory. Would they become conquerors themselves, ruling the former Valari territory with the same cruelty their enemies had shown? Or would they build something better? He hoped it would be something better. He had not fought and watched friends die just to become the next empire of oppressors. On the ground, General Wu met with the leaders of the various rebel factions. They represented dozens of species, all of them former slaves of the Valari. They had different shapes, different colors, different languages, but they all had one thing in common. They had been freed by humanity. What happens now? One of them asked. His name was difficult to pronounce. His species communicated partly through color changes, so he had taken the nickname Blue. Will you humans rule us instead? Wu shook his head. No, we did not come here to build an empire. We came to settle a debt. Then what? Then we go home. We will help you establish your own governments. We will provide aid and support while you rebuild. But we will not rule you. You are free beings. Your future is your own to decide. Blue stared at him with large, liquid eyes. No one has ever freed us without wanting something in return. What is your price? Wu smiled grimly. Remember us. Remember that 300 years ago, we were taken like you. Remember that we came back. And remember that any species that practices slavery will face the same fate as the Valari. He looked around at the assembled leaders. Spread the word. Tell your children and grandchildren. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. And humanity always pays its debts. The message spread quickly through the galaxy. The great Valari Empire had fallen. Their homeworld was occupied. Their emperor was a prisoner. Their military was destroyed, and the beings who had done this were humans. A species most of the galaxy had never even heard of. A species the Valari had dismissed as primitive slaves. Empires that had thought themselves safe began to worry. Civilizations that had practiced cruelty wondered if they would be next. The balance of power in the galaxy shifted overnight. On the prison ship where Emperor Vorm was held, a human guard brought him his meal. The Emperor looked up with hate in his eyes. You think if the Galactic Assembly had not met in full session for over 1,000 years. The Great Chamber, built on a neutral station at the heart of known space, could hold representatives from 500 species. Today, it was filled to capacity. They came from every corner of the galaxy. Empires and republics, monarchies and democracies, ancient civilizations and young species just beginning their journey among the stars. They came because they had to. The balance of power had shifted, and they needed to see the beings responsible. They needed to see the humans. Admiral Yuna walked into the chamber with her head held high. She wore her dress uniform, black with silver trim, decorated with medals she had earned over 30 years of service. Behind her walked Commander Tay, Captain Hana, Captain Sujin, and General Wu. The heroes of the Valari War. The assembly fell silent as they entered. Thousands of eyes in every shape and color imaginable watched the humans take their place at the speaker's platform. Yuna looked around the chamber. She saw fear in many faces. These beings had heard stories of what humanity had done. They had seen the fall of an empire that had seemed undefeatable. They wondered if they would be next, but she also saw something else. Hope. The representatives of former slave species looked at her with gratitude and admiration. The weak and oppressed of the galaxy had found a new champion. Representatives of the Galactic Assembly. Yuna began, her voice strong and clear. I am Admiral Yuna of the Human Defense Force. I stand before you as the voice of my species. She paused, letting the silence stretch. 300 years ago, the Valari Empire attacked a human colony ship. They took 40,000 innocent people, families, children, dreamers who wanted only to explore the stars. They enslaved them. They worked them to death. They threw their bodies away like garbage. The chamber was utterly still. No one moved. No one spoke. The Valari believed they could do this without consequences. They believed humanity was too weak, too primitive, too unimportant to ever pose a threat. They believed they could erase our people from history, and no one would ever know or care. Yuna's eyes swept across the assembly. They were wrong. Humanity remembered. Humanity prepared. And when the time was right, humanity came to collect what was owed. The Valari Empire is no more. Their homeworld is under our control. Their emperor is in our custody, awaiting trial for crimes against sentient beings. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some representatives shifted nervously in their seats. I know what many of you are thinking, Yuna continued. You wonder if humanity will become the new oppressors. You wonder if we will use our victory to build our own empire of fear and cruelty. You wonder if you should be afraid of us. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. Let me be clear. Humanity did not fight this war for power. We did not destroy the Valari Empire to take their place. We fought for one reason and one reason only: to settle a debt that was 300 years overdue. She straightened and spoke her next words slowly and deliberately. That debt is settled. The Valari have paid the price for what they did to our people. We will not seek revenge against any other species for crimes they did not commit. We will not build an empire on the ruins of the Valari. We will not become the very thing we fought to destroy. Relief showed on many faces, but Yuna was not finished. However, she said, her voice hardening, let me also make something very clear. Humanity has a long memory. We do not forget those who harm us. We do not forgive those who abuse the innocent. And we always pay our debts. She looked directly at the representatives of the larger, more powerful civilizations. From this day forward, the galaxy will operate under a new understanding. Slavery is forbidden. The conquest and exploitation of weaker species is forbidden. Any civilization that violates these principles will face the same fate as the Valari. Protests erupted from several sections of the chamber. Old empires that had practiced forms of slavery for millennia objected loudly. You cannot dictate terms to the entire galaxy, one representative shouted. He was from the Korth Dominion, a civilization known for its brutal treatment of conquered peoples. Yuna turned to face him. Her expression did not change. 3 weeks ago, the Valari said the same thing. Where is their empire now? The Korth representative fell silent. I am not dictating terms, Yuna continued. I am stating facts. Humanity has demonstrated what we are capable of. We built a fleet in secret for 50 years. We planned our revenge for 3 centuries. We destroyed a 10,000-year-old empire in less than a month. She let those words hang in the air. We do not want war. We do not want conquest. We want to live in peace among the stars. But we will not stand by while innocents suffer. If any civilization in this galaxy practices slavery or commits atrocities against the helpless, they should know that humanity is watching, and humanity will remember. The chamber was silent again. The message was clear. Humanity might not seek power, but they had it, and they were willing to use it to protect the innocent. General Wu stepped forward. The former territories of the Valari Empire will be reorganized into independent states. The species that were enslaved, there will be given the opportunity to govern themselves. Humanity will provide aid and protection during the transition, but we will not rule them. He looked around the chamber with hard eyes. We ask nothing in return except this. Remember what happened here. Remember that power does not justify cruelty. Remember that the weak can become strong. And remember that humanity always pays its debts. The session continued for several hours. Representatives asked questions, made proposals, argued among themselves. But the core message had been delivered. The galaxy had changed, and everyone knew it. After the session ended, Eunice stood alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. Commander Tay found her there, staring into the infinite darkness. "You did well," he said, standing beside her. "The galaxy heard your message." "Some of them heard it," Eunice said quietly. "Others will need time to understand. And some will never accept it. The Court Dominion? Among others. They have practiced slavery for 5,000 years. They will not abandon it because of one speech." Tay nodded. "Then we may have to fight again. Perhaps. But not today. Today, we celebrate what we have accomplished. Tomorrow we begin building something better." She turned to face him. "My grandmother used to tell me that revenge was empty. She said it could not bring back the dead or heal the wounds of the past. For a long time, I thought she was wrong. I thought revenge would make me feel complete. And now?" Eunice smiled sadly. "Now I understand what she meant. The dead are still gone. The pain is still there. Victory does not erase 300 years of suffering. But she also taught me something else. She taught me that what matters is what we do with our pain. Do we use it to destroy, or do we use it to build?" She looked back at the stars. "The Valari used their power to cause suffering. We used ours to end it. That is the difference between us. That is what makes us human." 1 year later, Lieutenant Minjun walked through the streets of a city on the Valari homeworld. The place had a new name, now Shinmang, meaning New Hope in the old Korean language of his ancestors. It was home to former slaves from a dozen species, all working together to build a new society. He wore civilian clothes instead of his uniform. The war was over, and he had chosen to stay behind as part of the reconstruction effort. His skills as a pilot were useful for cargo transport, and he found that he enjoyed the work. It was peaceful after everything that had happened. A group of children ran past him, laughing and playing. Some were human. Some were from other species. They did not seem to notice or care about their differences. To them, the war was history. The future was what mattered. Minjun smiled. This was why they had fought. Not for revenge, not for glory, but for this. A chance for the children to grow up free. A chance for different species to live together in peace. A chance for something better. He passed the memorial that stood in the center of the city. The wall of 40,000 names, carved in stone for all eternity. Fresh flowers lay at its base, placed there by visitors who came from across the galaxy to pay their respects. He stopped and read some of the names. He did not know any of them personally, but in a way, he knew them all. They were his ancestors in spirit, if not in blood. Their suffering had made this moment possible. "Thank you," he whispered. "We kept our promise." Back on Earth, Admiral Yuna had retired from active service. She spent her days in a small house by the sea, tending a garden and watching the waves. She was at peace, for the first time in her life, but she still kept a small shrine in her home. A picture of a young woman with long dark hair and bright eyes. Park Yoonji, age 19, the ancestor who had been stolen from the stars. "We brought you home," Yuna told the picture every morning. "We brought all of you home." The shrine held something else too, a small piece of stone from the memorial on the Valari homeworld. A fragment carved with part of a name. A piece of the promise kept. Yuna's great-granddaughter visited often. Her name was Haun, and she was 7 years old. She liked to hear stories about the war, about the brave soldiers who had freed the slaves and defeated the empire. "Grandma Yuna," she asked one day, "will we,